Welcome to Coffee Break with Rachel Vigil, presented by Superbook Sports. Taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel Vigil.
Happy Monday, everybody. We've got a Broncos game today. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I watched about 5 minutes of football yesterday, and that is very surprising for me, but I was just running around doing all sorts of other things, but I'm so excited for the game tonight. There's a ton to get into. Richie Carney is going to join us here in just a little bit, too, to kind of discuss what happened over the weekend because Jared Bednar called out his team essentially for quitting. Michael Malone got pissed off. And then, of course, as we look ahead, how much does tonight's game mean for Russell Wilson's career? It's going to be an interesting conversation. Let us know in the comments how you guys are feeling about it. But let's get into the big news to start off the show. The Denver Nuggets have offered Michael Malone, who led the franchise to a 2023 NBA championship, to a contract extension. It'll make him one of the league's highest paid coaches. Great for Michael Malone. I'm really happy for him. Honestly, I know a lot of people aren't a huge fan of Michael Malone. I don't know how you can't be after what we experienced last year, but I actually love how he approaches the game, how he approaches his players. Even in his press conferences, he's super honest, and I appreciate that at all costs. So I'm excited for Michael Malone, happy for him, and of course, many more years. There's no official details of what this contract extension is looking like. We're not sure how many years or how much money. We do know he's going to be in here for a long time. And if it was me, I would say, hey, keep Michael Malone however long Nikola Jokic is going to play and have those two combined together. Now, speaking of Nikola Jokic, 36 points, 21 rebounds, and 11 assists. You guys, that stat line hasn't been accomplished in 55 years. Wilt Chamberlain did it last in 1968. Now, tell me this. 36 points, 21 rebounds, and 11 assists. And the Nuggets lose last night to the Houston Rockets 107-104. That is absolutely insane to me that you can have a stat line like that. And man, does it show that they are missing Jamal Murray. Michael Malone goes on to say, it's not my responsibility to get guys going. I mean, you're an NBA player. Woo-wee, Michael Malone. All right. I appreciate it. Going to some of the comments, you guys. How important is tonight's game for the rest of Russell Wilson's career? People said, especially for Russ, Sutton, Boyles, and Simmons. Bulls, not Boyles. Bulls and Simmons. That was a bad weekend for Colorado sports. It was definitely not a great weekend for Colorado sports. Hopefully the Broncos can turn it around. Happy Monday, Rachel. Happy morning. Wilt numbers, says Tommy. Yes, Nikola Jokic, man, is just an absolute legend. We are so lucky to be able to watch him. And the Nuggets are going to be playing, including last night, 11 of the next 14 on the road. So hopefully they can figure out their bench unit and get some guys going, those younger guys. A lot of people were very critical last night saying, okay, well, why didn't they just shove Jokic in there? There's this fine line when it comes to this team of use this time right now with Jamal out to really figure out who your bench is going to be, what that's going to look like, and use it for those younger guys to, start to get some minutes. But at the same time, you have to kind of balance that. Do you really want to say you lost to the Houston Rockets so early on in the season? It's a really, really fine line. Michael Malone's trying. And of course, it comes down to a 3-point game, which unfortunately they just can't close out, which is a huge bummer. Now for the Colorado Avalanche, Pavel Francouz. Oh, we've been saying, where is Francouz? Where is him? Where is he? And he's not going to be returning. Colorado Avalanche announced yesterday that he would be returning back to the Czech Republic with his family for the rest of the year after he has that lower body injury. It's been a huge question mark of what the heck is going on with Francouz. It's a bummer. And now what will Georgie be able to do for the rest of the season? And of course, they've got Prosvetov as well out there. So another good question. It's going to be interesting. And how much is Jared Bednar going to continue to yell at his team and call them and say that they're quitting? It's a great question. If you did not see this, I was shocked. Usually Jared Bednar is a very level-headed guy. I don't think I've ever seen him so fired up about something, but fired up in the most monotoned way. And when I saw the quotes, you guys, I was just unbelievable. And I can't believe it. And then, of course, he comes out and has the great quote of if you can't do it in the game, we're going to do it in practice or something along those lines. And I know Richie Carney had tweeted out a video from Miracle, I believe it is. And it reminded me so much of it too. And you guys, it was just crazy, but it's true. They lost 4-3 to the Kraken. That was just a heartbreaker of a game. It comes down to the last 30 seconds. That was on Thursday. Then you lose 8-2 on Saturday night to the Blues. That one really stung, and it just didn't look like they were in it. Their hearts had just stopped playing out there, and you're what are we doing? Cale Makar, I know that there was some quotes coming around from him, and it was essentially hey, we're all gelling off the ice, but on the ice, things aren't necessarily clicking. And it's like, well, what is not clicking for them then? How is this happening? Did we, start too hot essentially, and everybody thought that everything was going to be super easy? This season was going to go by. Or is it because some guys are a little bit injured? And of course, losing Arturi Lehkonen, another one of those guys that was there for the cup run, that hurts. I don't know the answer to it, but it's a good question. And I really hope that they're able to get back on track against the Kraken tonight in Seattle. This game is going to be big, but the main key for the Avalanche is to get one in the back of the net first. That's going to be a major, major key for them here tonight. Now, have you guys all seen this video of Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers yesterday? It was going viral. It's so fun for me. And here it is. Nathaniel Hackett is essentially calling a play to Zach Wilson. All of a sudden, they're going to show Aaron Rodgers, and he just starts shaking his head like he disagrees with what the play is. And this clip has been absolutely going viral, and I think it is so funny. And if you're Broncos country, you're absolutely loving it. But here's the thing. It's time. I was such a big Zach Wilson fan. I was like, all right, this kid's coming in. He's going to be great. Things are going to be really fun for him. He's like making his name for himself with Aaron Rodgers being out. And then I feel like ever since I said that and I was like riding the high of Zach Wilson, he's gone absolutely downhill. Something has to change. They either need to bench Zach Wilson for Trevor Siemian, or Nathaniel Hackett needs to be relieved of his play calling duties, which shouldn't we have learned that before when we look back at what happened here in Denver? I don't know. The Jets offense has gone 11 quarters without scoring a touchdown. 11 quarters since not scoring a touchdown. You guys, that is ridiculous. And how good their defense is, too. You would think that they would be able to do something. But I just think back on how the Broncos lost to the Jets. And all I'm thinking, if they could have just won that game, how different the talk would be around here. They would be 4-5, still be kind of in this conversation. But of course, they lose a game like that to the Jets. And you're just like, well, that's the Broncos gonna Bronco right there. However, something does need to change in New York. I don't know what the answer is to that, to be completely honest, but something needs to change. Also, another fun little stat for you to tell all your coworkers today. 5 teams, Arizona, Cleveland, Detroit, and Houston, and Seattle, all converted a game-winning field goal with no time remaining in Week 10. That's crazy to think about. I love those last-second goals where your heart's kind of like, what's going to happen? I think it's always fun, but that's the most in a single week in the NFL history. So there's like a little fun stat for you. Now, another interesting fun stat, and I've been very critical of this person in my time, Kyler Murray returns with a comeback win after 335 days. He had a 59.4 completion percentage, 249 yards, 1 interception. He looked all right, but it's still one of those stories that you're like, all right, he came back. He was able to put out a win after 335 days. Not too bad for him. Now, here we go. Deion Sanders is being brought up to replace Jimbo Fisher as the Texas A&M's next head coach. And Stephen A. Smith, of course, he's always got something to say when it comes to Deion or anything. And he says, Deion Sanders in the SEC, with that vault, they have him available to him. Them hogs that he could recruit, he doesn't have them at Colorado, and he ain't going to get them. I don't think they'll do it. Now, could Deion Sanders possibly go to the SEC? I would typically be like, I think he really does like it in Boulder. But how about this? 4-star wide receiver Winston Watkins Jr. tells me he is decommitted from Colorado, you guys. He's 5'11", 185, wide receiver out of Florida, decommitted from Colorado. And he comes out to say, essentially, I don't know if Deion will be there when I go. Holy smokes. Okay, well, do you know something that we all don't know? Obviously, there's a lot of talk. You never know what happens behind the scenes. But it is fascinating that, of course, Deion says he's not going to the NFL. He doesn't know what's going to happen. Who knows what's going to happen with Shedeur and Shiloh. But I do find it interesting that you have a decommit and then he's possibly being linked. Now, I don't know if this 100%, again, like Stephen A. could just be talking and saying, I want him to go to Texas A&M. It would make sense. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I do find it very interesting that you're seeing a decommit. Want to read some of your guys' comments? Of course. Did Hackett rave about the Raiders again this time? Maybe. He just couldn't understand that there is such thing as like a rivalry and we should hate any teams in the AFC West when he was here. But look at how it is. Also, people are going to be mad at me for saying this. Good for the Raiders. Good for the Raiders. Obviously, you get rid of Josh McDaniels, and now look at him. You're seeing videos of players that are celebrating, and I do find it weird that they're smoking cigars in the locker room. That's my own personal thing, but I just find that quite interesting. Another quick thing before we get to the Broncos. The most touchdowns in the history of college football. Does anybody have a guess for this? I'm going to give everybody a quick second to put this in the comments. I can tell you probably have not heard of the name too much, and that's a fault on me. That's a fault on a lot of us because we should be talking about it because it's right here in Colorado. But John Machocha, I'm probably butchering that. I apologize to him. He has the most touchdowns in the history of college football. Mines football ends their regular season 11-0, and they outscored RMAC opponents 500-77 this year, you guys. That is absolutely insane to me. 500-77, finished the season 11-0, and huge congratulations to them over there. Of course, they say the next season starts now as they get ready for the playoffs. And I believe our very own Josh Dover, I'm going to look over at Richie right now because I'm pretty sure Josh Dover calls all of their games. So he should be giving a huge shout out to them as well. And of course, we'll be excited to see what they're able to do. Now, another one of the interesting things that kind of came out this weekend, which we all kind of assumed and knew, is that Patrick Surtain was being linked to the Eagles and to the 49ers. And essentially, we got reports were saying that both teams didn't want the other team to end up with Patrick Surtain. So they were both calling about him because, of course, they're very much in the Super Bowl playoff contention. Where could they land? And if they would add a stud like Patrick Surtain ahead of the trade deadline, then who knows what could happen. And I do find that to be interesting. Of course, Denver ended up keeping him. I'm happy they ended up keeping him. But it is an interesting just kind of like twist and turn to the story of like the Eagles really wanted him. The 49ers wanted him, but they also did not want the other team to be able to get them. And then, of course, Denver just ends up sticking with them. So let me know in the comments how you're feeling, obviously, about tonight's game. It's going to be a good one. And I think, in my own personal opinion, that a lot is riding on this. So we will bring in Richie Carney here in just a quick second. But you guys, the last Monday night win on the road was at the Chargers on October 15th, 2012. 2012, think about how much has come. People thought that the world was going to end in 2012. I think back to that. I was, I think, in middle school when that was happening, which was absolutely crazy. But a loss at the Bills would be their 8th straight overall on Monday Night Football, tied for the second longest losing streak in the NFL. A win would mark Denver's first 3-game win streak since September of 2021. Oh my goodness, you guys, that is just crazy to even think about. Again, October 15th of 2012 was the last time that the Broncos won on Monday night. That's even longer than it was for them to beat the Chiefs. So plenty of good stuff. Well, look who's here. Richie Carney returns to the coffee break table. Looking snazzy, my friend. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited for tonight. There's a lot to talk about, obviously, when it comes to it. But I think the biggest question is, how important is tonight's game for the rest of Russell Wilson's career? And I'm curious to hear your opinion, because the more and more I talk to people about this, the more and more it seems like people are disagreeing with my take.
I would say it's massively important.
Thank you.
It is massively important, and I'll tell you why. Because with the disastrous start that they got off to in this season, it was collapse for Caleb. It was fire sale at the deadline. It was all that. Well, they didn't do it.
Yeah.
They didn't do it. And now they're sitting on 2 straight wins, albeit an ugly one against the Packers and then a dominating one against the Chiefs in one of the best games that they've played and looked in probably a decent length of time.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're going into Buffalo in a primetime game, which has been a hall of horrors for them in Russell Wilson's tenure here. But if they rattle off a 3rd straight win and they get to 4-5, I understand you could take the argument another second. Well, if they win in Buffalo, they'll still be in last place in the AFC West. Yeah, but they'll be basically right there record-wise. They'll be like right there.
Mm-hmm.
So at 4-5, you're all of a sudden kind of creeping up on that in the hunt category.
Yeah.
And they have to do that now because they chose not to do what I think you and a lot of others advocated for, which was to break this down to the studs.
Well, and here's my thing is, no matter what, they're not going to win the AFC West. I'm sorry. The Chiefs are going to roll with it. Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, obviously. It's like everyone's being like, okay, is she going to be able to come back for the Super Bowl? Like, they're not going to win the AFC West. That's just a known fact. I'm sorry if I'm going to break everybody's hearts when it comes to that. But if you can get into a wild card spot, you just need the record to be able to do that. So can the Broncos figure it out? Tonight's game is everything. I've been saying it is the season on the line when it comes for this Denver Broncos team. It all comes down to tonight. If you can beat the Bills, you're coming off a bye, you're coming off a hot win against the Chiefs. Can you beat the Bills?
Yeah. And listen, I think that we've all grown very accustomed to watching Josh Allen here, and we've played the agonizing what if games if 2018 went a little differently, but it's not hyperbole to say that this is a winnable game for the Broncos. The Bills, as good as the Bills have looked and can look, and as talented as Josh Allen is, and how sometimes when I lay my head on my pillow at night, I still wish that I could wake up and he would be here. They're beatable. They have a one-dimensional offense in a lot of ways. Josh Allen's got it in him to turn the ball over.
Yep.
And the formula that they use to beat the Chiefs, who are definitely, even though they're a weaker version of themselves, I think this year than in years past, definitely better than the Buffalo Bills, and they throttled them. So to say that they couldn't win 3 straight weeks and make this happen is crazy, because they can't. And the crazy thing is, because I agree with you, it does all come down to tonight. There's massively important. If they win against Buffalo, their next primetime matchup on Sunday night is like just as big and just as important.
No, 100%. It's like it continues on of, okay, if you continue to win,
every game is the best, is the biggest game ever.
100%. But if they lose tonight, none of it matters. The rest of the season, it doesn't.
It will feel very deflating
matter.
Because right now you're 3-5. If you win, you're 4-5, and you're just right there at 400, or at 500, just underneath it, where they had never been. But if you lose, you're back down to 3-6. You've lost twice as many as you've won, and it just feels deflating.
And you already beat the Chiefs, so like you cross that
one
off. You're like, all right, that's over. No, tonight's big. And to be honest, for Russell Wilson, it's even bigger. He struggled with your eyes. I know the stats have like said good things about him, but with your own eyes, if you watch him go out there, you're like, oh my gosh, he just looks like he's struggling. You guys, I know people get mad at me when I say this. This is like Russell Wilson's Hall of Fame career. Like, I'm sorry, if he ends up like burning out, I don't think he makes it in. Well, you can have an amazing career in Seattle, but if you end your career on such a low that he did, I don't think he makes it in.
The Hall of Fame induction process, as we've learned with Randy Gradishar over the years and certain things like that, it's so much of it has to do with the narrative around you and the perception. And Russell Wilson's narrative going into this Broncos experiment since he left Seattle was he couldn't have been more firmly on that track. He was I think the fastest quarterback to 100 wins, or the winningest quarterback through his first 10 years of his career, something like that in NFL history. He was the moon ball throwing, run and gun all over the place kind of guy. And it has just been a meteoric collapse in that regard. So is it like if they lose this game, or if he flames out, is it like a guaranteed he's not going to make it in? No, but I will say that the narrative will have changed drastically, and those who may have been very adamant to defend him might not be, if that's the case. And I will say that if it bottoms out this year, and his days as a starter in the NFL are probably numbered, if not done.
What a crazy flip around. It's just, I mean, think about when he was coming to Denver and everyone was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the greatest thing ever.
Rachel, this Broncos team has had a sickness for years, the better part of a decade, and they just have refused to take their medicine. They won't burn it down. They won't strip it and draft a quarterback and develop one high in the first round. I know they did the Paxton Lynch experiment and all that, but they haven't committed to the traditional way that NFL teams rebuild after winning a championship. And when they signed Russell Wilson, I was like, they did it. They have tried to cheat the system and cut every corner
and do all this stuff,
and it's failed and failed and failed, but it's going to work this time. And nope.
And it didn't.
Not yet.
It didn't work. When you're looking at Russ tonight, what sorts of stats, like what's a good stat line for you?
Pass attempts. I want to see his pass attempts low, because I think that is
you want them to run the ball.
Well, yes, because Rachel, I'm telling you. Yeah, and it's kind of like a backhanded statistic. Like it could have been like, oh, I want him to throw for X amount of yards or his completion percentage. But I'm telling you, they, advertently or not, they stumbled on a formula that works well for Russell Wilson against that Chiefs game. I think he threw the ball 19 times.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because it doesn't feel that way. Again, you go back to the narrative and the vibe around things. Like when he was in Seattle, I could have sworn that he was throwing the ball 30-something times a game, every game, slinging it all over the yard. DK Metcalf's down there somewhere, Tyler Lockett, et cetera, et cetera. But in their more successful games, even in Seattle, that was the formula. They had a strong running game with Marshawn Lynch or whatever cavalcade of backs, because they went through a lot of injured ones during his time in Seattle. They had the strong running game, and Russell Wilson wasn't asked to do what we all thought he was so good at. It was just like this masterful sleight of hand. So I want to see his pass attempts low. But if you're asking me for a better stat, he's got to keep the turnovers down. He's got this penchant for fumbling the ball lately, especially when he's scrambling out of the pocket. Still doesn't make a ton of, errant interception throws overall, if you look at the season as a whole. But he has this fumbling problem, not like Melvin Gordon level, but it's there.
Yeah. Oh, Melvin Gordon. Those were just terrible times.
We've had some crazy times.
I'm just thinking back, I'm like, oh man. But I kind of do that same thing of like, Russ, just hold on to the ball. Please just like really hold on to the ball like it's your kid. Please just don't let it go.
Well, and then the other thing, and like, but I say that almost as like a twofold. Like I agree, hold on to the ball, protect it. And I think he's got to be a little bit more aware in the pocket, because I think he takes some sacks coming from behind. And I understand that sometimes your tackles leave you high and dry and whatever.
You're talking INTs.
Yeah.
You're saying interceptions he's got to be aware of.
Yeah, because, well, he's got to be aware of that, but also I think he holds on to the ball too long because he's afraid of throwing an interception, or he's so
100%.
Determined not to, and then that leads to bad sacks. He's had a couple this season that have knocked him out of field goal range on third down, or whatever it is, or it leads to a scramble play like the one where he was running up the sideline and he fumbles the ball and it changes the momentum of the game. So I think that if we can keep his passing attempts low, establish a run game, and make it a little bit easier on him in that regard, it'll make it more natural for him not to force those things.
No, 100%. And Bill's safety, Micah Hyde, is out for tonight, as well as Christian Benford. So can we start to see the wide receivers pick it up a little bit? I think tonight's going to be your best shot. And I think Russ has got to be able to throw some deep balls. And he's actually really good at throwing the deep balls as long as he's got the time.
Exactly. And I will say this, because it's the quarterback takes the lion's share of the blame and often the smaller share of the credit sometimes when things go well. And that comes with the nature of the position.
Yep.
But as I was just critical of Russell Wilson for holding on to the ball too long and doing something like that, some of that, if it's not the offensive line protection breaking down, and you can see it when you go back and watch the All-22 on things.
Yeah.
The receivers just aren't getting open as much or as quickly as they need to on a lot of plays. You got guys running into each other. There's route confusion, or you got guys, how many times have we come in here and talked about, instances of Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and some of these guys giving up on routes late in games.
Where you just want them to lay out a little bit. You're like, all right, Cortland, just extend for it. Jerry Jeudy,
6'5".
come on.
We should all be so lucky. Just use that.
Yes, 100%. But I be a big game. And I think I know we all want to see the run game. More rush, less Russ. I know we want to see that really bad. But I do think that this is an opportunity, because they're going to be down in their secondary, to see what we've got with these wide receivers. And that sounds silly to say going into week 10, right? That's what we're at. And I'm like, I know that sounds silly to say, but like, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think you have to have an identity and a process, which I think are two things that the Broncos...
Do you have an identity for this Denver Broncos team, though? Because I still don't.
No, I don't think they collectively have one. And I think part of that is because we've had new head coach and play caller combinations coming in so frequently that it's hard to develop who you are when what you are changes so frequently. But I will say, when the Broncos have been their most successful, their identity has been what it was against the Chiefs.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to have a game plan and a process, but you have to be willing to take what the defense gives you. So if they've got a banged up secondary and you've got the opportunity to take some shots, do it within measure. You know what I mean?
Let's stick to the game plan.
Don't put the chips all in when you don't have to.
We can add like a little bit of a nugget of like, oh, we'll see what can happen here. Here's my problem with Sean Payton. Is it seems like, we have the game plan, and then he wants to play all these mind games, and he's like, okay, well, let's throw this in. And then I get so frustrated because then we don't have the identity of this football team, and then we are just playing games, and then they lose.
It's like it's like a genius paradox, right? It's like you have somebody that is so highly regarded as an offensive mind, as a head coach, as a this, as a that. And part of that has been their ability to kind of Mozart their way through things and be fluid and be creative, and Mike McDaniel and Kyle Shanahan and Matt LaFleur and all these buzzword guys that are just these young wonderkins and all that. And Sean Payton was that, for a time early in his career. But then there's other times where you almost want to rein that in. So it's like what's made them great. It's almost just like we want you to do less of that.
Yep.
And that's frustrating.
It just doesn't make sense. Sometimes I get confused and frustrated by the game plan with the Denver Broncos. However, I do want to talk to you because you were there on Saturday night.
Yes.
When Jared Bednar kind of laid into his team, and it's not something we see very often. What was the room like when Jared Bednar essentially said his team had quit?
You could have heard a pin drop. I that's a common, phrase, and that gets used a lot. I'm telling you, it was icy to the degree where I was like trying to be self-aware as, I'm sitting in the very front row because I want to get a good angle and I want to be like, front and center and make eye contact, especially if I'm going to ask a question. And I'm sitting there filming his response when he's saying that. And I'm like frozen. And there was a moment where I'm watching through the phone and he looked during that response, he looked directly at me. And it, almost in my mind, I was like, is he angry that I'm filming this right now? Like I had this like panic to where I like looked up from my phone and I was like,
Richie's like, are you going to make me run in practice?
Yes.
Are you going to make me skate in practice?
It was just like that scene. I know you referenced it earlier from Miracle. Cause in the movie, he says it, you don't want to work during the game. We'll work right now. And Bednar said like, fine, you don't want to work during the game. We're going to work in practice. And it's like, oh, and I'll give him credit though. Cause he backed off of it. In the morning skate that next day, that Sunday, he's like, I would have loved to run him into the ground, but we barely had enough healthy guys to practice and we got to play tomorrow. So I'll give him credit for, taking a deep breath and measured. But the fact that he did that, because Michael Malone will go to that well a lot. Mm-hmm. He's no stranger to calling his players soft, ripping them.
Love it.
Yeah, he's no stranger to doing that. Sean Payton has a couple lattes. He'll let it fly. Anything happens. Jared Bednar never does that.
No.
So the fact that he did, and he broke that normally cool cucumber demeanor that he has, it tells you a couple of things. One, it's a real problem. And we heard it from inside the locker room from Logan O'Connor, who was like, hey, we preach accountability as a team all the time. Cale Makar said the same thing. Yeah. But maybe we're not the best at actually showing it. Our actions aren't matching our words. So it's a real problem. And he's serious enough about it to address it publicly.
Yeah.
And so this isn't a situation, because I think a lot of times and justifiably so with the Avs and even the Nuggets, when they go through rough patches or lulls, it's like, listen, it's a long regular season. They'll figure it out. They're the defending champs. They won a cup. They'll figure it. He's not seeing it that way, so we shouldn't either.
And this feels different. Mm-hmm. Like this is teams that are getting shut out. I think they had 3 out of 4 where they got shut out.
Yeah, it was Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and Vegas.
Yes.
Yeah, it was 4-0, 4-0, 7-0. And we've been, I personally have been high on Georgie.
Yeah.
A lot leading into the season, but his last 5 to 7 starts have been brutal. I think he's got like an 8-7 something save percentage, 31 goals given up in 7 games. And they're like 1-5 or 1-6.
It's tough. And it's tough to watch a team that you're like, oh, they've got all the pieces. And then it's them saying, oh, it's gelling off the ice, but not on the ice. And you're like, well, what's the problem? Where is like the missing piece here? Of course, lots of people are saying, oh, bring Patrick Kane in and that's going to fix it.
Yeah, he's the magical elixir.
But to be honest, I feel like that's just putting a Band-Aid over. And I feel like here in Denver, we like to just put Band-Aids over a lot of things, and it doesn't tend to work. So lots of good stuff. Thank you so much for hanging with us on.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully the Broncos are able to get a win tonight. Wouldn't that be crazy? The playoff talk would really continue. You beat the Bills and the Chiefs. Oh boy. It would be fun. So hopefully, I kind of have mixed feelings. My head tells me one thing, my heart tells me another.
Listen, if they lose by 25 tonight, I'm going to come out and be like, well, I mean, we all saw that coming, right? But there again, just like, and I know you felt it too, because we were talking about it during the game, just like I had this little inkling that was like, at some point, this damn streak with the Chiefs is going to end. And I didn't think it'd be that dramatic. I just have a feeling, because I've seen Buffalo be mortal, that like it's possible. And I think they might. If they do what they did last week, I think they'll win. Stick
to the game plan, Sean Payton. On that note, everybody get back to work. Thank you so much for hanging with us. We'll see you at 10:30 tomorrow morning. Bye, everybody.